What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Paul and I make videos about Japanese society, life, and culture from the viewpoint of a long-term foreign resident. I've been in Japan for 18 years and unfortunately it is the rainy season here in Japan now, so I can't go out and do my usual walk around video because the weather's been really bad all week. So I'm making do, and I want to give a huge shout out thank you to Nobita from Japan, or the Japan Reporter as he's rebranded his YouTube channel, because he gave me some indoor content that I can do, which is reacting to his latest video about English education in Japan. It's been my life. I'm not claiming to be the ultimate expert, but I definitely have some things to say about the opinions shared on the video. First of all, I do want to say that he does a pretty good job of doing a back and forth, pro-English in Japan and anti-English in Japan. So I'm going to try to comment on both sides of the issue because I agree with things from both of those sides. So if you're interested in English education in Japan, if you like his channel and you want to see what other people think of his opinion, well, you've come to the right place. I want to thank you for watching this video, and without further ado, let's get started.
The discussion has been going on more and more often nowadays, and let me share both sides of arguments. For those who don't know yet, we study English from early age and it's a required subject, just like math, science, or Japanese class. But what's the result? Most people in this country can't speak any decent English and don't have any confidence to speak that. So this is such a waste of time.
I think that the current situation is we've wasted a lot of money, we've wasted a lot of time. So many resources are put into so little benefit.
I totally understand he's saying this because as a teacher, the last thing you want is unmotivated students, and you feel like you're wasting their time.
What about people who don't want to speak English? Not every student in Japan is interested in studying English.
So yes, I agree with the first part of that. It seems like a lot of effort has been made in terms of changing curriculum and starting children learning English earlier, trying to get better trained teachers, etc., and Japan still tends to really lag behind in terms of the actual proficiency. So it does seem like there's not a lot of benefit for the effort put in, although it can be argued that, it may just be that it's been the wrong type of effort. Different things could be done. But then they get into this argument of, well, not everyone needs English, or not everyone wants to study English. And, well, that's the old adage, you go to school and you learn a variety of subjects. Not everyone is going to use algebra in their future life. Not everyone is going to care that very much about biology. So if it's like, well, only do the things that you want to do, then we're revamping the entire school system in that case. And we're just trying to talk about what's the problem with English here.
No matter what kind of teacher you give to a student like that, they're probably not going to achieve high level of English because they have other things that they want to think about.
So definitely shouldn't be mandatory, maybe just optional, because most of us in Japan don't need to speak any English.
Most people in Japan don't use any algebra, geometry, calculus, yet they still learn all of those things. That's not the point of a lot of things for education. It's getting like a well-rounded, well-balanced view of the things that are possible in this world. And I can count numerous students of mine who came to my classes or actually earlier in high school, etc., and they have stories about how they hated English, they didn't want to learn English, and then something happened that turned that all around and they realized, oh, actually, I really do want to learn English, and oh, this English is actually going to be really useful for what I want to do in the future that I've discovered just recently. And so it's very often the case that elementary school and junior high school students, of course they have no clue what they're going to do with English in the future. That doesn't mean that not having that opportunity won't be important to them further down the road, because life changes, life happens. I didn't think I was going to be living in Japan even when I was a university student. At that point, I had no intention of being here. Life comes at you, things change, and your goals and what you want to do with your life change as well.
Some people just think it's better to just be with Japanese people and live in an Japanese environment. And for those people, I'm not really sure if they should ever even studies that English.
Not everybody needs to be able to speak English really well.
The people who live in the very rural side of Japan, there's only Japanese people, small community, probably don't see any point of learning English at all, and probably there's no chance to use it.
Exactly! Especially the ones in rural area really don't need that.
Yeah, there's certainly going to be people who don't ever need English and have no plan to continue studying English or use it in any capacity. That's totally fine.
Of course, some Japanese people need it or really want to study English. But nowadays, we got a lot of private school or online service. So why not those people just use it? Only motivated ones should do it. And that's gonna benefit both teachers and students.
こちらの英会話バーっていうんですかね。
カジュアルなのでテキストブックを使わないでより日常的にプラクティカルな英語を学んでいただけるようなレッスンをしてます。テキストってそれってじゃあ実際海外行った時に使えるかって言われると必ずしもそうではないと思うんですよね。
Okay, I mean, it's a fair point that there should be these options for people who really want to learn English and have other ways to go about doing so, but if it's just about starting to pay money for those who want to do it, then we're talking about it's people who have money. So now it becomes a classist thing. And so maybe some people really do want to learn English, but they don't have the money to go to English cafes or pay for English conversation lessons online even. I mean, you could say, well, they're not that expensive, but everyone's financial situation is different. And to say like, we're only going to make it a private service that you have to pay for, that's going to leave out a lot of people who might otherwise want to learn the language.
それぞれ個人の意欲が結構やっぱ重要かなというふうに思ってまして、やっぱ中学生、高校生の時って多分意欲っていうのがあまりないんですよね。義務教育で英語を教えるというよりも、その英語を喋りたい人たちに学ばせてあげる。そういったやり方がやはりやっぱいいかなとは思います。
Well, part of the lack of motivation, again, is to how English is often taught, which is unfortunately a lot of translation, a lot of teaching it like it's Latin, a dead language, and there's not enough chance to really see it as a practical language, something that could genuinely be useful in life or for interacting with people in Japan or abroad, etc. So just to say people are demotivated just because they're in junior high school and high school, well, I mean, a lot of students are demotivated about a whole number of different subjects. Again, are we just going to say, oh, well, there's no motivation, so there's no point? I don't think that's how the logic works.
Exactly. That's why we don't need required English class. Why not just let private companies or schools do the job?
It's still about getting the correct grammar, memorizing terminologies. So anything that you learn from school, useless, I'd say.
There you go. You think it's useless. Of course that's going to demotivate you. So it's not about should there be English or not. Actually, it's probably more about how should that English be taught.
If they are interested in foreign language, why assume that all kids want English class? Maybe some kids want Spanish class or Chinese class.
興味があれば中国語を勉強する人もいるだろうし、自分のやりたいことにももっと集中して。
This is something I completely agree with. Absolutely. I mean, that's the way it is in America. We're not all sent into a particular language. We're given a choice, but at least in many school districts, studying a language is a requirement, and it certainly is in many universities as well. So I had to take a language, but I did have a choice of what language to take. That's something I could get behind. I could totally agree that it doesn't have to be English for everyone, because there are a lot of students who are interested in Chinese, or there's a big Korean language boom right now because of K-pop and interest in Korean culture in general. So I could get behind a change to the system where language is required, but you actually are given a choice of what language you want to study. Of course, there's lots of pratfalls to that, like where are we going to find all these teachers for other languages when we have a system built up right now that's all around English? I mean, it would be a huge change, but perhaps a worthwhile one.
For those who don't know yet, I have a twin, Sewashi. So let's hear his perspective as well. I totally disagree with Nobita. First of all, why do you wanna listen to this kind of weird guy? Probably you shouldn't. Second of all, think about how beneficial for Japan as a country if more people speak English and understand what's going on in other countries.
I think a lot of Japanese people think because you're in Japan, you don't have to learn about other cultures or you don't have to learn English. But I think by understanding these social issues going on in the US or other countries, Japan has a lot to learn. like both good and bad side. But because a lot of people aren't interested in foreign countries or learning English in general, it's really hard for Japanese people to understand these issues.
If you're a person living in Japan and you've got your career and you've got your family life, there's nothing that says you have to be concerned with what's going on outside of Japan. I mean, you've got your own life to deal with. And I don't know if that's the strongest of arguments that we need to understand what's happening in cultures around the world. Again, if we're talking about school children, like learning world cultures, I think is a very important thing, being exposed to that as part of the education system. But, I mean, I don't know if it's the footage that Nobita is showing or what, but it's like people about their daily lives in Japan, and in those instances, if you're just going about your daily life, I'm not sure that it's so important that everyone needs to know what's going on in foreign places.
And keep in mind that it's gonna help so many foreigners in Japan.
If I try to get some assistance from a Japanese person, it's obviously difficult to communicate because their English is limited and my Japanese is even more limited than theirs.
Japanese is one of the hardest language, and many foreigners have really hard time interacting or understanding Japanese culture or people because of the language barrier. But if we could speak better English, they can interact with us much more comfortably.
If you have an economic motivation to help foreigners, then yeah, it's probably a good idea to learn English. If you want to have basic skills to help foreigners find something because there's so many tourists in Japan, that's fine. But again, I don't feel like it's some kind of duty of Japanese people to be able to help foreigners, so therefore you learn English. That obviously shouldn't be the case. And frankly, if you're a foreigner and you're living here, then it's on you to learn Japanese and not expect the help of Japanese in English just for your sake.
So objection! Come on, dude. Why assume like that? As far as I know, many foreigners are willing to speak Japanese in Japan, so they're not necessarily wanting us to speak better English.
To me, I can speak Japanese.
There, he makes my point for me. Nicely done.
I think it's nice if people can speak English if they work at a shop or something where they have a lot of tourists coming in. I think it's just friendly to be able to talk to customers and things, but I don't think they have to speak English necessarily, no.
If you move to Japan and you would like to interact with Japanese people, how about learning Japanese?
Okay, again, some foreigners want to and do learn Japanese is not then an argument that Japanese shouldn't learn English in schools. Like, I feel like we're blurring some lines here that if I was teaching an academic discussion class, I'd be like, okay, we need to set very clear parameters. Are we talking about society after education and what people have to be able to do? Or are we setting what should be done as part of the education system, and then later on, if some continue to use English and some don't, whatever? I think we're talking about two very distinct layers there. Should we have English as part of the education system? I would say absolutely yes. Does every Japanese person need to know English after they've graduated from school? Absolutely no.
And besides, we don't have enough teachers. I mean, qualified teachers. So this is what's happening in Japan.
The Japanese school system, to force feed them information that they don't care about from teachers who don't have the skill to actually provide it. There aren't enough high quality teachers. There aren't enough students who actually care. They can't teach the things that they're best at. They have to teach English. Imagine trying to teach an entire country a foreign language. That's essentially what the Japanese government is going for. Every person should be able to speak both English and Japanese. It's unreasonable of me to expect that the whole population of all 120-something million of us in Japan are able to do that.
Isn't that more a failure of the system that's in place rather than an argument against having English as an educational goal? Again, it's almost arguing two different layers here. Like, there's a functional problem and then there's a theoretical, do we need this issue? It seems to me that the functional problem could be solved if there was enough really concentrated efforts to do so in terms of putting smart people together, giving the right kinds of funding in the right places, etc. I think it could definitely be done, because I don't think it's fair to be like, well, we Japanese, we're never going to have the capable teachers we need. I think there's going to be plenty of Japanese people who could be perfectly capable English teachers. They just might thrive more completely in a better English education environment.
In Shanghai, actually student needs to learn English when they are grade 1 in the primary school. So the starting age is really different. Most of the Chinese learn English much earlier than Japanese people. Like in Shanghai, you have to have 10 scores of speaking. So it will force you to practice pronunciations, not only grammars. I believe that no children is really interested in these textbooks. So my teacher changes the reading paragraph, or she changes the listening materials into all these conversations. During the 50 minutes class, she was just ask us to practice again with our classmates. That experience really made me feel it's very fun to speak in foreign languages.
You see my point, right? It's all about getting the right education system and right teaching style. It's totally feasible. Japan gets closer to Korea, China, or even Singapore possibly. So yeah, we should objection! We got to consider the risk. Downside though. First of all, why assume that improving English will benefit Japan? It might be opposite, because that could cause children's Japanese ability decline.
The Japanese students absolutely deserve to have the best Japanese language education that they can possibly get. But every new year of English that we give to the students is basically 1 year that we take off the top of their Japanese education. So when we increase their basic English with 1 more year, we decrease their advanced Japanese by 1 year. It's a terrible trade-off.
Okay, this point could be valid, but I need to see actual data and evidence. I have trouble believing that it's this sort of one-to-one correlation that they're painting here. Like, oh, we add English and this takes away. And I see this again and again with discussion. People have said that, well, maybe it's better if my kid does not do much English because their Japanese will suffer for it. And anyone who knows bilingual research knows that that's not how it works. You don't become worse at one language just because you're better at another. The point about not being able to write Japanese as well, I think that has to do with a lot with devices. When you've got a phone and a computer and everything fills in the characters for you, I mean, I can do a lot of writing in Japanese on my smartphone, but if you ask me right now to write those characters, I'd be like, let me look on my phone.
For every year that we add to basic English, we take away a year from the students' advanced Japanese. So that means that students spend 1 more year away from reading the great literature of Japan's past.
Again, if we accept that this logic is true, that starting English earlier really cuts that much out of learning Japanese, then that would mean that Korea and China are then suffering the same problems if they've got these education systems that emphasize English. So Koreans must be having problems with their Korean, Chinese must be having a problem with their Chinese. And if you showed me that data, okay, I'm going to pay attention to this point a little more clearly. But it seems like maybe China and Korea aren't worried about those things, so should Japan be worried about that?
Despite the fact that the Japanese is obviously the national language of Japan, it almost feels like it is linguistically colonized. Like Japanese is a lower prestige language in many places. In advertisements, there's English everywhere. The news, on NHK, for example, national broadcasting system. So it's essentially as Japanese as the news can possibly get. And even NHK is completely flooded with foreign loanwords, to the extent that some people say that modern Japanese is not Japanese at all. Japanese is as beautiful and deep and complicated and important as any great language, that it should be preserved in Japan more than anywhere else in the world. In terms of language, I teach English, but actually I have taught Japanese before, and I absolutely love Japanese. People who don't know and understand and love language don't realize what kind of sacrifice we're making.
I don't know, this feels kind of like more of a xenophobic argument than an argument against having English as part of the education system. Like companies using random English and Japanese broadcasters borrowing loanwords, which are often used in they're words that aren't actually used in English. They've become like a Japanized version of a word. like, oh no, we're being invaded by foreign ideas. Well, welcome to the 21st century, I guess.
By devaluing a language, especially devaluing the language in its own country.
We got to focus on Japanese language first. So objection! I don't know what he's talking about. Just because we try to improve English, it does not mean devaluing Japanese language. First of all, most Japanese people can speak Japanese well, obviously. Enough to carry a
Okay, so basically he's just saying what I just said, which is why I mentioned I felt that he did a pretty good job of presenting both sides.
Over-exaggerating this issue. Second of all, why not focus on the benefits? It could be much better for a brain. So why would you stop that?
So you speak 3 languages?
Japanese and Chinese is my native language, so I can deal with them very fluently with no stress. And for English, I believe I can use English in my work with no big stress, I believe.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you feel like your Japanese or Chinese ability is kind of going down?
No, I don't feel so. But you raised a very important point, which is I still keep my effort of keep my level of Chinese and Japanese. It's not like after you require this Japanese, oh then like 10 years later I can also speak Japanese. Like we are the same people. I mean, if they can do that, why Japanese cannot do that? I know that there are many cases that people, because they learn foreign languages very early, so they forget how to speak their mother language and their brain cannot have this perfect system of learning language. But I think if in Japanese, your parents speak Japanese, in kindergarten, the surroundings are speaking in Japanese, definitely you're going to learn how to speak Japanese because there's a Japanese speaking environment there. You don't need to worry about too many things.
And here's the thing. All Japanese people I talked to said this. Everyone. But at this point, after growing up, they feel like it's too late.
It's like what I said earlier. You don't know if you're going to need it or want to do it when you're a young kid. It's just the truth of life.
今オーストラリアに来てやっぱ一から勉強し直していてすごい苦戦してるんですよね。この年でやっぱ一から言語を覚え直すっていうのはすごい大変なことで絶対にこれはちっちゃい頃からやるべきだなって。
Of course, Japanese kids or teens, they don't know why English is so important yet, but later they will realize that and regret. They may be not motivated. But is that only English class? When I was a kid, I didn't like any subject, and of course,
Thank you very much.
Motivated to
That's exactly what I said earlier.
At that age. But do I regret now studying that? Of course not.
Exactly what I said earlier. Well done.
ペンとか習うじゃないですか一番初めに。あんなものをなんて思うかもしれないですけど、実際に文法を知っとけばその言葉を言い換えれば使えるわけじゃないですか。みんなやる気がなくても頭には絶対入ってはいると思うんですよね。絶対やる気がない子にも教えるべきじゃないかなとは思います。
Okay, the rest of the video, they're talking about reasons to have English ability or not, etc. And as you can see, what I mentioned before is that Nobita really does a good job of kind of presenting both sides, including saying things that I mentioned as I was listening. I only watched the first very beginning part of this video and then decided to do a reaction video to it. So I didn't know that he was actually going to say at the end there what I was talking about at the beginning. So good on him. And I do think that the main thing I get out of this is that, well, 2 points really. The first is a definite change in the education system could be very helpful in terms of helping students be motivated, be interested, and feel like they're actually learning a practical skill rather than boring translation and things they're never going to need. I also think that in addition to the ability to improve the system, is that we are talking about 2 different layers in this video, and I feel like we'd almost be better served to have a video that focuses on, do we need the education system, yes or no? And then a second video which would be, do we need English in Japanese society? Because I feel like those can be 2 very separate, of course related, but very separately discussed issues, and they're a bit too mixed in this video to make it really easy to talk about, well, which side do I agree with or not, because I agree that there should be English education in Japan, but I also agree that not everyone needs English, and English doesn't necessarily have to be important in Japanese society for Japanese people. I think you can have simultaneously those two opinions. So maybe I'll make those two videos in the future. One, how to improve the English education system in my thoughts and ideas, and another video which is how much is English really needed in Japanese society? Yes or no? Let me know if you'd like to see either of those two videos or both. But anyway, thank you very much for watching this particular video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have, please subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.